Imagine for just a moment that you wake before sunrise. The room around you is cold, dark, and strangely quiet except for the distant crowing of a rooster. There is no electric light to switch on, no warm shower waiting for you, and certainly no phone buzzing with overnight messages. Instead, you find yourself lying on a mattress stuffed with straw, covered by rough wool blankets that smell faintly of smoke from last night's fire. Outside, the village is beginning to stir. A church bell echoes across the fields, announcing another day of work. Whether you are ready or not makes little difference. In the medieval world, your day, and much of your life, is governed by rules that you did not choose and cannot easily escape. Tonight, we journey back nearly 700 years into the heart of medieval Europe, where everyday life was shaped by customs, traditions, and laws that would seem astonishing to us today. Some rules were created by kings. Others came from the church. Many were simply accepted because everyone believed they had always existed. Together, they controlled almost every part of daily life, from the clothes people wore and the food they ate to whom they could marry, where they could travel, and even how they spent their Sundays. If you were born into a peasant family, your future was largely decided before you could even walk. Most people never traveled farther than a few miles from the place where they were born. The idea of choosing a career, moving to another city, or reinventing yourself belonged to a future no medieval villager could imagine. Your identity was tied to your family, your village, and the lord whose land you worked. These were not simply social expectations. They were obligations backed by custom and often by law. One of the first things you would notice is that society itself resembles a great ladder. At the very top stands the king, believed by many to rule with God's blessing. Below him are powerful nobles who control enormous estates. Knights serve these lords in exchange for land and protection. Priests and monks guide the spiritual lives of the people. At the bottom are the peasants, who make up the overwhelming majority of the population. They grow the food, repair the roads, tend the animals, and perform countless tasks that keep the kingdom alive. Climbing this social ladder is almost impossible. Birth determines destiny far more than talent. Even the clothes you wear may be chosen for you. In many kingdoms, laws known as sumptuary laws determine which fabrics, colors, and decorations different social classes are allowed to wear. Rich merchants cannot always dress like nobles, and poor villagers certainly cannot. Silk, velvet, expensive furs, and brilliant dyes are often reserved for the wealthy. Clothing is more than protection from the weather. It serves as a public announcement of your place in society. Wearing something above your station could lead to fines or public embarrassment. Religion also shapes every hour of life. Church bells divide the day into familiar rhythms. Sundays and holy festivals are dedicated to worship, and missing church without a good reason may attract suspicion from neighbors or punishment from local authorities. Most people believe deeply that their eternal soul depends upon living according to Christian teachings. Priests not only conduct religious ceremonies, but also record births, marriages, and deaths. The church is both a spiritual guide and one of the most powerful institutions in Europe. The medieval calendar is unlike our own. Instead of weekends and vacations, life revolves around feast days, harvest seasons, and religious celebrations. During planting and harvest, nearly everyone works from dawn until dusk. Winter brings shorter days and fewer farming tasks, but it also brings cold homes, limited food supplies, and constant concern over whether the stored grain will last until spring. Every season has its own rules, responsibilities, and dangers. Perhaps the strangest rule of all is how little control ordinary people have over their own time. The rising sun signals the beginning of work. The setting sun signals its end. Without clocks, watches, or electric lighting, daylight becomes the most valuable resource of every day. The pace of life is slower than ours, yet it is filled with endless physical labor. A medieval farmer may spend hours plowing fields by hand, gathering firewood, repairing fences, caring for livestock, or grinding grain into flour. There is rarely such a thing as a truly free day. As evening approaches, smoke rises gently from cottages across the countryside. Families gather around small fires, sharing simple meals of bread, pottage, and perhaps a little cheese if they are fortunate. Stories are told from memory because books are rare and precious. Darkness arrives quickly, and with it comes silence. Beyond the glow of the fire lies a world many believe is filled with wolves, thieves, wandering spirits, and unknown dangers. Most people lock their doors, whisper a final prayer, and hope tomorrow brings good weather, healthy crops, and another peaceful sunrise. So, as you settle in and allow your imagination to wander through the quiet villages and winding roads of medieval Europe, remember that every ordinary day was quietly shaped by countless rules, some practical, some deeply religious, and others simply accepted without question. In the next chapter, we'll step inside a medieval village and discover the unusual laws that governed daily life from the moment the sun rose until darkness fell. As the first light of dawn spreads across the fields, the village slowly awakens. A rooster crows somewhere beyond the cottages, followed by the familiar ringing of the church bell. There is no need for an alarm clock. The entire community rises together because nearly everyone's day follows the same rhythm. In medieval Europe, the village is more than a place to live. It is your entire world. Every path, every field, every well, and every home exists within a network of customs that everyone is expected to obey. Many of these rules have never been written down, yet they carry as much authority as the commands of a king. The first rule you quickly learn is that the land beneath your feet does not truly belong to you. Nearly everything around you belongs to the local lord. The fields, forests, rivers, and even the mill where grain is ground are part of his estate. Your family may have farmed the same strip of land for generations, but ownership remains in noble hands. In return for the right to live and farm there, you owe labor, taxes, or a share of your harvest. Refusing these obligations is not simply frowned upon. It could mean losing your home entirely. Even the shape of the fields reflects the rules of village life. Rather than owning one large piece of land, most families cultivate several narrow strips scattered across enormous open fields. This system ensures that everyone shares both the fertile and less productive soil. It also means no one can decide independently when to plant or harvest. The entire village works together according to an agreed schedule. If one farmer planted too early or harvested too late, it could disrupt everyone else's crops. The village common is another carefully regulated space. This shared meadow allows families to graze cows, sheep, or geese, but strict limits often exist. One household may be allowed 2 cows, another perhaps only 1. Bringing more animals than permitted risks damaging the grass that everyone depends upon. Neighbors watch one another closely, and disputes over grazing rights can become surprisingly heated. In a small community where survival depends on cooperation, fairness is taken very seriously. The surrounding forest may appear wild and free, but it too is governed by rules. Collecting fallen branches for firewood is often allowed in limited amounts, yet cutting down healthy trees without permission can bring severe punishment. Hunting deer, boar, or other game is frequently reserved for nobles. A hungry peasant caught with a deer may face heavy fines, imprisonment, or worse. To modern eyes, this seems harsh, but medieval forests represent valuable resources carefully protected by those in power. Water, one of life's greatest necessities, is equally regulated. Wells must be kept clean, streams cannot be polluted, and village ponds are shared according to long-established customs. Washing dirty clothes or slaughtering animals too close to the drinking supply is considered both irresponsible and dangerous. Although medieval people know nothing about bacteria or viruses, generations of experience have taught them that contaminated water often brings sickness. One of the most important rules concerns the village oven. In many places, families are not allowed to bake bread in their own homes. Instead, They must use the Lord's communal oven and pay a small fee each time. The same often applies to the village mill, where grain is ground into flour. These fees may seem insignificant, but over time they become another steady source of income for the local lord. Even something as simple as baking bread reminds everyone of the social order. Animals also follow unexpected rules. Pigs wander freely through village lanes searching for scraps, chickens peck around cottages, and geese graze beside ponds. Yet every owner is expected to keep track of their livestock. If your pig destroys a neighbor's vegetable garden or your cow tramples another family's crops, you are responsible for the damage. Arguments over wandering animals are common, and local courts spend surprising amounts of time settling these everyday disagreements. The church stands at the center of village life, both physically and spiritually. Nearly every important event begins or ends there. Births are celebrated, marriages blessed, and funerals held beneath its stone walls. Attendance is expected, not optional. Missing church repeatedly may lead neighbors to question your character or even your faith. In a world where community and religion are deeply connected, being absent from worship can make you an outsider. Village life also depends upon countless unwritten expectations. Neighbors help repair damaged roofs, gather harvests before storms arrive, and care for sick families. Refusing to help during times of need may not break an official law, but it damages your reputation. In a community where everyone depends upon everyone else, trust is almost as valuable as food itself. As evening approaches, smoke curls from dozens of chimneys while the church bell rings once more. Farmers return from the fields with tired hands and muddy boots. Children gather firewood before darkness falls. Women stir pots of pottage over open fires while men repair broken tools for tomorrow's work. Another ordinary day draws to a close, shaped by customs that have guided village life for generations. To modern eyes, these rules may seem restrictive, even overwhelming. Yet for medieval villagers, they provide order in an uncertain world. They tell people where to work, how to share resources, when to celebrate, and how to survive together through harsh winters, failed harvests, and difficult years. The rules are not merely restrictions, they are the invisible threads holding the village together. But beyond the peaceful appearance of these small communities lies another set of even stranger laws. In the next chapter, we will discover how your clothes, your appearance, and even the colors you wear could determine how others judged you before you spoke a single word. As another morning begins in medieval Europe, you prepare for the day in much the same way as everyone around you. You pull on a simple linen shirt, a wool tunic, sturdy leather shoes, and perhaps a hood to protect yourself from the morning chill. To modern eyes, these clothes might seem plain, but in the Middle Ages, every thread, every color, and every piece of fabric carried meaning. Long before someone spoke to you, your clothing revealed who you were, how much money your family possessed, and exactly where you belonged in society. One of the strangest realities of medieval life is that you cannot simply wear whatever you like. Across many European kingdoms, rulers introduced what were known as sumptuary laws. These laws were designed to control luxury and maintain the social order. They dictated which fabrics, colors, jewelry, and decorations different classes of people were permitted to wear. While the details varied from one kingdom to another, the message remained the same. Your appearance should match your place in society. Imagine walking into the village wearing a robe made from fine silk, dyed a brilliant crimson. Today, people might simply admire your fashion, but in medieval Europe, such clothing could immediately attract unwanted attention. Silk was expensive, imported from distant lands along dangerous trade routes. Rich scarlet dyes required rare ingredients and skilled craftsmen. These materials were symbols of wealth and privilege, often reserved for nobles and members of the royal court. If an ordinary merchant or farmer dressed this way, questions would soon follow. Even colors carried hidden meanings. Bright purple, for example, had long been associated with emperors and rulers because producing the dye was incredibly costly. Deep scarlet and rich blue were also considered signs of wealth. Most peasants wore undyed wool in shades of brown, gray, or cream because these natural colors required little processing. Their clothing reflected practicality rather than fashion. The brighter your garments, the more likely people were to assume you possessed status, or were pretending to. Fur offered another clear sign of social rank. Wealthy nobles lined their cloaks with ermine, sable, or fine squirrel fur to display their prosperity during the cold winters. Ordinary villagers relied on rough sheepskin or simple wool for warmth. Wearing luxurious furs without permission could result in fines in certain regions. The goal was not merely to prevent extravagance, but to preserve visible distinctions between the classes. Jewelry followed similar rules. Gold chains, jeweled rings, pearls, and elaborate brooches were often restricted to the upper ranks of society. For most villagers, ornaments consisted of simple wooden beads, iron pins, or small bronze buckles. These modest accessories were practical rather than decorative. Owning valuable jewelry was not only expensive but also dangerous, as thieves often targeted anyone displaying obvious wealth. Clothing also reflected occupation. A blacksmith's heavy leather apron quickly identified his trade. Monks wore plain robes that symbolized humility and devotion. Knights appeared in armor or richly embroidered garments displaying the colors and symbols of their noble families. Merchants often dressed more finely than peasants but less extravagantly than nobles. Without a single word being spoken, clothing communicated a person's role within society. Yet fashion itself changed slowly. Unlike today, where styles may shift every season, medieval garments remained remarkably consistent for generations. Clothes were expensive to produce because every thread was spun by hand and every garment carefully stitched. Most people owned only a few sets of clothing. A single wool cloak might last many years, patched repeatedly whenever holes appeared. Nothing was wasted. Even worn-out garments could be transformed into blankets, children's clothes, or cleaning cloths. The process of making clothing required enormous effort. Sheep had to be sheared each spring. The wool was cleaned, combed, spun into thread, dyed if affordable, and finally woven into fabric. Linen required growing flax, soaking it, beating the fibers apart, spinning them into thread, and weaving them into cloth. Every shirt, dress, and cloak represented hundreds of hours of labor. This explains why people valued clothing so highly and repaired it again and again rather than replacing it. Cleanliness was another challenge. Washing clothes demanded large quantities of water, wood for heating, and homemade soap produced from animal fat and ashes. Because this process required so much work, garments were not washed frequently by modern standards. Instead, people often aired their clothes outside or brushed away dirt whenever possible. Linen undergarments helped absorb sweat and could be cleaned more easily than thick wool outer garments. Children usually wore miniature versions of adult clothing. There was little distinction between children's fashion and adult fashion. As soon as they were old enough to help with daily work, their clothing reflected practical needs rather than comfort or play. Fancy outfits for children were largely reserved for noble families, where appearance carried political importance. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of medieval clothing is that it served almost as a language. A noble's velvet cloak, a merchant's carefully tailored tunic, a priest's black robe, and a farmer's coarse wool garments all told stories about their owners. In a world where many people could not read or write, clothing became one of the easiest ways to understand another person's place in society. As the evening shadows lengthen and villagers return home from another day of work, cloaks are pulled tightly against the cooling air, boots are left by the doorway, and wool garments hang beside the fire to dry. Tomorrow, the same familiar clothes will once again announce each person's identity before they utter a single word. But while your clothing revealed your place in society, your meals revealed something equally important. In the next chapter, we'll explore the surprising rules that govern what medieval people could eat, when they could eat it, and why even a simple loaf of bread was surrounded by unexpected traditions and restrictions. As the sun climbs slowly above the fields, the smell of wood smoke begins to drift through the village. Somewhere, a pot of thick vegetable stew bubbles gently over an open fire. Nearby, fresh bread is cooling on a wooden table, while a family prepares for another day of work. Food is at the center of medieval life, yet eating is far more complicated than simply satisfying hunger. Every meal is shaped by tradition, religion, the changing seasons, and a surprising collection of rules that determine not only what you may eat, but also when, where, and even how it should be prepared. For most people, breakfast is surprisingly small. Many medieval villagers begin the day with nothing more than a piece of coarse bread and perhaps a little ale. To modern ears, drinking ale in the morning may sound unusual, but the weak, small ale consumed by ordinary families contains very little alcohol and is often safer to drink than untreated water. Brewing also helps preserve grain, making it an important part of everyday life rather than simply a luxury. Bread is the foundation of nearly every meal. Rich nobles enjoy soft white loaves made from finely sifted wheat flour, while ordinary peasants eat darker bread made from rye, barley, oats, or whatever grains happen to be available. During difficult years, flour may even be mixed with beans, peas, chestnuts, or acorns to make supplies last longer. The quality of your bread quietly reveals your place in society, much as your clothing does. Perhaps the most common meal is something called pottage. This thick stew simmers for hours in a large iron pot hanging above the fire. Every day, new ingredients are added: onions, cabbage, carrots, beans, herbs, and whatever vegetables are growing in the garden. If the family is fortunate, a small piece of bacon or salted meat may flavor the pot. Sometimes yesterday's leftovers simply become today's meal. The stew changes with the seasons, but the pot itself rarely grows cold. One of the strangest rules surrounding food comes from the church. Throughout much of medieval Europe, Christians are expected to observe numerous fasting days each year. During these periods, eating meat from warm-blooded animals is forbidden. Instead, families rely on fish, eggs, vegetables, bread, and dairy products. Depending on the region and the century, nearly 1/3 of the year may include some form of fasting. These religious traditions shape farming, fishing, markets, and even trade across the continent. Fish therefore becomes incredibly important. Rivers, lakes, and coastal waters provide herring, cod, trout, eels, and countless other species. Salted fish can be stored for months, allowing families to survive long winters and fasting seasons. Wealthy monasteries often maintain their own fish ponds to ensure a reliable supply throughout the year. In some places, even creatures like beavers are classified in unusual ways because of their aquatic habits, allowing people to eat them during certain fasts. Fresh meat is much rarer than many people imagine. Although villagers raise pigs, chickens, sheep, and cattle, these animals are valuable sources of eggs, milk, wool, and labor. Slaughtering them too often would threaten the family's future. As a result, meat usually appears only during festivals, weddings, harvest celebrations, or particularly successful hunts. For ordinary peasants, vegetables and grains provide most daily nourishment. The medieval calendar influences every meal. Autumn is a season of abundance, when fresh fruit, vegetables, and newly harvested grain fill homes and storehouses. Winter tells a different story. Fresh produce disappears, replaced by salted meat, dried peas, beans, onions, turnips, and preserved apples. Families carefully ration supplies, knowing that eating too much too early could lead to hunger before spring arrives. Food preservation becomes one of the most important skills in the household. Without refrigerators or freezers, people rely on salt, smoke, drying, pickling, and fermentation. Meat hangs above smoky fires for weeks. Herbs dry from the rafters. Apples are stored in cool cellars, while cabbage becomes preserved through simple fermentation. Every method helps stretch precious food supplies through the colder months. Meals themselves follow quiet customs. Wealthy nobles may dine in grand halls where servants present multiple courses filled with roasted meats, pies, cheeses, and imported spices such as cinnamon, cloves, and pepper. These expensive spices do more than flavor food. They demonstrate wealth and international trade connections. Meanwhile, peasant families gather around a single wooden table or even sit near the fire, sharing one large pot from which everyone eats together using wooden spoons. Table manners also reflect medieval values. Before eating, hands are washed in bowls of water, especially among wealthier households. Knives are common personal possessions carried by many adults, while forks remain rare in much of Europe for centuries. Bread often serves as both food and plate. Thick slices known as trenchers hold meat and stew before eventually being eaten themselves or given to the poor. Despite all these customs, hunger is never far away. A poor harvest, an early frost, heavy rain, or invading armies can quickly destroy crops and empty granaries. Medieval families understand that survival depends not only on hard work, but also on good fortune. Every successful harvest is celebrated with gratitude because everyone remembers years when the fields yielded far less. As evening settles over the village, families gather once more around glowing hearths. The day's final meal is simple but comforting. A bowl of warm pottage, fresh bread if any remains, perhaps a little cheese, and a mug of ale shared among loved ones. Outside, darkness spreads across the fields, while inside the fire crackles softly against the cool night air. Tomorrow will bring another day of labor, another modest meal, and another quiet reminder that in the medieval world, food is never taken for granted. Yet even after supper ends, life remains governed by another powerful force. In the next chapter, we will discover how the church shaped nearly every moment of medieval life, from birth and marriage to festivals, punishments, and the countless religious rules that touched every ordinary person. The first sound you hear each morning is not the chatter of neighbors or the creaking of wooden carts. Instead, it is the deep, familiar ringing of the church bell. Its steady echoes drift across fields, forests, and narrow village lanes, reaching nearly every home. For the people of medieval Europe, these bells are more than a call to worship. They announce the rhythm of daily life itself. They signal when to begin work, when to pause, when to celebrate, and sometimes when to fear. In many ways, the church is not simply a place of prayer. It is the heart of the community, and its influence reaches into almost every corner of ordinary life. Unlike today, religion is not something reserved for a single day each week. Faith surrounds nearly every moment of the medieval world. Before eating, families bow their heads in prayer. Before planting crops, they ask for God's blessing. Before setting out on a journey, they pray for safe travel. Even before going to sleep, many whisper quiet prayers by the fading light of the fire, hopping for protection through the night. Life feels uncertain, and faith offers comfort in a world filled with illness, famine, and unexpected danger. One of the most important rules is simple: attending church is expected. Every Sunday, and on many holy feast days throughout the year, villagers gather inside the local church. Missing services without a good reason may attract criticism from neighbors or questions from the parish priest. The church is not only a place of worship, but also the center of village life. Important announcements are made there, disputes may be discussed nearby, and festivals often begin after religious ceremonies. For most villagers, the priest is among the few educated people they will ever meet. He reads from sacred texts written in Latin, a language most ordinary people cannot understand. Yet even though the words themselves may be unfamiliar, the ceremonies are deeply meaningful. Candles flicker softly beneath stone arches. Incense fills the air with sweet smoke, and stained glass windows cast colorful light across the floor. These rituals inspire awe and remind worshippers of a world beyond their everyday struggles. The medieval calendar is shaped almost entirely by religious festivals. Christmas celebrates the birth of Christ. Easter marks the resurrection. Saints' feast days fill the months in between. These occasions bring welcome breaks from hard work. Villages hold processions, special church services, communal meals, music, dancing, and seasonal fairs. For many families, these celebrations provide some of the happiest memories of the year. Yet alongside joy come strict expectations. During Lent, the 40 days leading up to Easter, many Christians avoid eating meat and certain rich foods. Some fast more frequently, reducing the number of meals they eat each day. These practices are believed to encourage humility, discipline, and spiritual reflection. Although difficult, they are accepted as an important part of religious life. Marriage is also closely governed by the church. Weddings are considered sacred ceremonies rather than private celebrations. Couples cannot simply decide to marry whenever they wish. Certain times of the year, particularly during major religious seasons, weddings may be discouraged or even forbidden. Marriage between close relatives is usually prohibited, and priests carefully oversee the ceremony to ensure it follows church law. Once married, divorce is almost impossible, making the choice of a spouse one of the most significant decisions in a person's life. From the moment a child is born, the church becomes part of their story. Babies are baptized soon after birth because many people fear that dying without baptism could endanger the child's soul. Birth, marriage, and death are all marked by religious ceremonies, creating a lifelong connection between every individual and the church. Even village records are often kept by priests, making them the guardians of both spiritual and community history. People also give a portion of their harvest to support the church through a payment known as the tithe, usually amounting to about 1/10 of crops or livestock. This contribution helps maintain church buildings, support priests, and assist the poor. While some families find the tithe burdensome during difficult years, refusing to pay is rarely considered an acceptable option. The church also shapes how people understand the natural world. A violent storm may be seen as a test of faith. A successful harvest may be viewed as a blessing from God. An eclipse, a comet, or an unusually harsh winter often inspires both wonder and fear. Without modern science to explain these events, religious belief provides the framework through which most people interpret the world around them. Pilgrimages become another important part of medieval faith. Those who can afford the journey sometimes travel long distances to visit famous shrines and holy sites. These trips are not vacations, but acts of devotion, undertaken in hopes of receiving spiritual comfort, forgiveness, or healing. Along the roads, pilgrims meet travelers from distant lands, exchanging stories and experiences that slowly spread ideas across Europe. As daylight fades and the evening bell rings across the countryside, villagers once again pause from their work. Smoke rises from cottage chimneys, candles glow behind tiny windows, and families gather together for their final prayers of the day. Outside, darkness settles over fields and forests, but inside each small home, faith offers a sense of comfort and stability in an unpredictable world. For medieval people, the church is far more than a building of stone. It is their calendar, their school, their record keeper, their moral guide, and their greatest source of hope. Nearly every important moment of life passes through its doors, and nearly every decision is influenced by its teachings. But not every rule is followed willingly. In the next chapter, we will leave the quiet safety of the village church and step into the medieval courtroom, where even small mistakes can lead to surprising and sometimes terrifying punishments. As the morning mist slowly lifts from the fields, the village seems as peaceful as ever. Farmers lead their oxen toward the open fields, merchants prepare their carts for market, and children carry buckets of water from the village well. At first glance, medieval life appears calm and orderly. Yet beneath this quiet routine lies a strict system of justice, where even ordinary disagreements can quickly become matters for the local court. In the Middle Ages, rules are not simply suggestions. They are backed by punishments that range from embarrassing public humiliation to heavy fines, imprisonment, and for the most serious crimes, death. Unlike modern societies with professional police forces, medieval villages rely largely on the community itself to maintain order. Everyone knows everyone else, and suspicious behavior rarely goes unnoticed. If a crime occurs, neighbors are expected to raise an alarm. In England, this is known as the hue and cry. When someone shouts that a thief has escaped or a crime has been committed, able-bodied villagers are expected to join the pursuit. Ignoring the call may itself be considered an offense, because protecting the peace is viewed as everyone's responsibility. Many disputes never involve dramatic crimes at all. Instead, they concern everyday problems that would sound surprisingly familiar today. A neighbor's pig wanders into another family's garden and destroys valuable vegetables. Someone accuses another villager of stealing firewood from the forest. Two farmers argue over the exact boundary between their strips of land. These disagreements are often settled in the local manor court, where the Lord's officials listen to witnesses and decide upon an appropriate punishment. One of the most common penalties is a fine. Instead of spending weeks in prison, a person who breaks a village rule may simply be required to pay money, grain, or livestock. For wealthy people, these fines may be little more than an inconvenience. For poor peasants, however, losing even a small amount of food or money can make surviving the winter much more difficult. Justice, while intended to be fair, often feels harsher for those with the least. Not every punishment involves money. Medieval society places enormous importance on public reputation. As a result, many penalties are designed to embarrass offenders rather than physically harm them. One well-known example is the stocks. A person found guilty of minor offenses such as drunkenness, disturbing the peace, or petty theft may have their hands and feet locked into a heavy wooden frame placed in the village square. Unable to move, they become the focus of curious crowds. Villagers passing by sometimes laugh, shout insults, or throw rotten vegetables at the unfortunate prisoner. While this treatment may seem cruel today, medieval authorities believe public shame discourages others from committing similar offenses. The punishment is not simply about discomfort. It is about damaging one's reputation in a close-knit community where trust is essential. An even harsher form of public humiliation is the pillory, which secures the head as well as the hands. Those placed inside cannot easily defend themselves from mocking crowds. Some remain there only for a few hours, while others endure much longer depending on the seriousness of their offense. For many people, the memory of public disgrace lasts far longer than the punishment itself. Theft is considered particularly serious because survival often depends upon limited resources. Stealing food from a neighbor's storehouse, taking livestock, or robbing travelers threatens the fragile balance of village life. Punishments vary depending on the value of what is stolen and the local laws, but repeat offenders may face increasingly severe consequences. In larger towns and cities, professional thieves sometimes operate despite these dangers, knowing that crowded markets provide opportunities unavailable in small villages. Violence is treated with equal seriousness. Fights occasionally break out during festivals, market days, or after too much ale has been consumed. If someone is injured, the court carefully considers the circumstances. Was it self-defense? Was it accidental? Did witnesses see what happened? Medieval justice is not always as arbitrary as modern myths suggest. Courts often rely upon testimony from neighbors who know the people involved. Serious crimes such as murder, treason, or large-scale robbery fall under the authority of higher courts. These cases may eventually reach royal judges traveling through the countryside. Punishments become far more severe, reflecting the belief that certain crimes threaten the stability of the entire kingdom. While such cases are relatively rare compared to everyday disputes, they remain a powerful reminder of the authority held by kings and nobles. Interestingly, medieval courts also concern themselves with matters we might find unusual today. Bakers may be punished for selling underweight loaves of bread. Millers can face penalties for secretly taking extra grain from customers. Tavern keepers may be fined for using dishonest measuring cups. Markets depend upon trust, and local officials regularly inspect weights and measures to ensure fairness. Oaths play a vital role in medieval justice. Swearing before God carries enormous significance because most people deeply believe that lying under oath endangers the soul. Reputation therefore becomes valuable evidence. A person known for honesty is more likely to be believed than someone already viewed with suspicion. In many villages, your good name may be one of your greatest possessions. As the sun begins to set, the village gradually returns to its familiar peace. The manor court closes for the day. Farmers lead their animals home. Merchants pack away their goods, and families gather around evening fires. Yet the lessons of the day's judgments linger in everyone's minds. Every punishment witnessed in the village square serves as a reminder that medieval society depends not only upon customs and tradition, but also upon visible consequences for those who break its rules. For the people of the Middle Ages, justice is rarely hidden behind distant institutions. It unfolds in front of neighbors, friends, and family members, becoming part of everyday life. The rules are clear, the community is always watching, and reputation can take a lifetime to build but only a single mistake to lose. In the next chapter, we will leave the village behind and travel into the crowded streets of a medieval town, where bustling markets, noisy workshops, and unfamiliar faces create an entirely different set of rules and a very different way of life. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the countryside, you leave the quiet village behind and begin walking toward the nearest medieval town. The journey takes several hours along a narrow dirt road lined with hedges, grazing sheep, and occasional travelers. Before long, the wooden roofs of houses begin to appear above the horizon, followed by the tall stone tower of a church and the protective walls surrounding the town. Unlike the peaceful rhythm of village life, the town feels alive with movement. Merchants unload wagons filled with goods from distant lands. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron into shape. Bakers pull fresh loaves from hot ovens, and traders call out to passing customers. Yet beneath this lively atmosphere exists another remarkable collection of rules. Rules designed to keep order in one of the busiest places in medieval Europe. Entering the town is not always as simple as walking through the gates. Many towns close their gates after sunset to protect the people inside from thieves, wandering criminals, or enemy raids. Travelers arriving too late may be forced to spend the night outside the walls, regardless of the weather. At sunrise, the gates open once more, allowing farmers, merchants, pilgrims, and visitors to enter. These walls provide safety, but they also remind everyone that towns are carefully controlled communities. The marketplace is the heart of the town. Here you find everything from vegetables and bread to cloth, candles, pottery, leather goods, and imported spices. But merchants cannot simply sell whatever they like, however they like. Local officials inspect stalls regularly, checking the quality of goods and ensuring honest trade. Using false weights or dishonest measuring cups is considered a serious offense because it damages trust within the community. Imagine purchasing a sack of grain only to discover later that it contains far less than promised. Medieval authorities understand how easily such cheating can spread if left unchecked. Officials therefore carry standard weights and measures, comparing them with those used by merchants. Bakers whose loaves are too small, brewers whose ale is watered down, or butchers selling spoiled meat may all face heavy fines or public punishment. Even prices are sometimes regulated. During years of poor harvests or food shortages, town leaders attempt to prevent merchants from charging unfairly high prices for essential goods. While these rules cannot always stop hunger, they aim to reduce panic and ensure that ordinary families can still purchase basic necessities. Fair trade is considered essential to the stability of the town. Guilds are another fascinating feature of medieval urban life. Nearly every skilled profession has its own organization. Blacksmiths belong to one guild, weavers to another, shoemakers to another still. These guilds establish strict rules about how products should be made, how long apprentices must train, and who may open a workshop. Becoming a skilled craftsman is not simply a matter of talent. It requires years of supervised learning under an experienced master. A young apprentice often begins training in early adolescence. For several years, they live with the master's family, learning every detail of the trade while receiving food, shelter, and instruction instead of wages. Only after proving their skill can they become a journeyman, earning payment for their work. Eventually, if they create an exceptional example of their craft, known as a masterpiece, they may be accepted as a master themselves. The word masterpiece that we use today originally referred to this final test of craftsmanship. Cleanliness inside medieval towns presents a constant challenge. Streets are narrow, houses stand close together, and many buildings are made of wood. Household waste is often thrown into gutters running alongside the roads, where rainwater helps carry it away. Residents are expected to keep the area outside their homes reasonably clean, though standards are very different from those of the modern world. Town officials occasionally issue regulations, requiring people not to dump rubbish directly into busy streets or public wells. Fire is perhaps the greatest danger facing any medieval town. Nearly every home contains an open fireplace, candles, or cooking fires, while most buildings are constructed from timber with thatched roofs. A single spark on a windy day can spread rapidly from one house to another. Because of this risk, towns enforce strict fire regulations. Chimneys must be maintained, ovens carefully watched, and in some places, night watchmen patrol the streets looking for signs of smoke after dark. Night itself follows a different set of rules. Once darkness falls and the town gates close, movement becomes more restricted. Carrying lanterns after sunset is often encouraged, while loud disturbances or drunken behavior attract the attention of town watchmen. Although medieval towns are far from silent, nighttime is generally expected to be calmer than the busy hours of daylight. Visitors from distant countries add another layer of excitement to town life. Italian merchants arrive with fine cloth and banking knowledge. Traders from the Baltic bring fish, furs, and timber. Ships unload wine from France, spices from Asia, and luxury goods that have traveled thousands of miles. For many townspeople, the marketplace offers their only glimpse of the wider world beyond their own kingdom. Yet despite all this activity, social order remains carefully preserved. Nobles, wealthy merchants, skilled craftsmen, laborers, servants, and beggars each occupy their own place within the urban community. Their clothing, occupations, and neighborhoods often reflect these differences. Even inside busy towns filled with opportunity, medieval society continues to value clear distinctions between social classes. As evening approaches, the marketplace gradually empties. Traders count the day's earnings, craftsmen extinguish the fires in their workshops, and the final customers hurry home before the gates close. The smell of fresh bread mixes with wood smoke drifting through the streets, while church bells echo one last time across the rooftops. Another busy day has ended, shaped by countless rules that keep trade fair, streets orderly, and the town secure. To modern visitors, these regulations may seem surprisingly detailed. Yet without them, medieval towns could quickly descend into disorder. Every honest weight, every inspected loaf of bread, every carefully trained apprentice, and every watchman on the city walls contributes to the stability of urban life. In the next chapter, we will step beyond the crowded streets and into the homes of medieval families, discovering the unusual rules that governed marriage, children, household life, and the roles every family member was expected to follow. As darkness slowly gives way to another peaceful dawn, smoke begins rising from the chimneys of cottages scattered across the medieval countryside. Inside these small homes, families are already awake. A mother adds another piece of firewood to the hearth, while yesterday's pottage warms gently in its familiar iron pot. A father checks his tools before leaving for the fields. Children quietly dress themselves, knowing there is work to be done before the sun climbs much higher. In the medieval world, the family is more than a group of relatives living together. It is the foundation of society, and like every other part of life, it is guided by a long list of customs, expectations, and unwritten rules. Perhaps the first thing a modern visitor would notice is how different childhood appears. Today, children often spend years in school before entering the workforce. In medieval Europe, childhood is much shorter. As soon as boys and girls are physically able, they begin helping their families. A young child may gather eggs from chickens, collect kindling from nearby woods, scare birds away from growing crops, or carry water from the village well. These small responsibilities gradually increase with age until, by their early teenage years, many children are working almost as hard as adults. Education is also very different. Most ordinary villagers never learn to read or write. Knowledge is passed down through observation and experience rather than books. Children learn farming by following their parents into the fields, baking by helping near the family oven, weaving by watching skilled hands move patiently across a loom. Every task is taught slowly through repetition, creating generations of craftsmen and farmers whose skills come from memory rather than written instructions. Respect for parents and elders is considered one of the most important rules in medieval society. Older family members possess valuable knowledge about farming, weather, livestock, and local customs. Their advice is rarely questioned openly. In many households, grandparents continue contributing by caring for younger children, preparing meals, repairing clothing, or sharing stories that preserve the family's history. Marriage is rarely viewed as a purely romantic decision. Love certainly exists, but practical concerns often come first. Families consider property, reputation, occupation, and financial security before agreeing to a marriage. In noble families, marriages may even strengthen political alliances or secure valuable land. Among peasants, marrying someone from a nearby village often makes daily life easier because both families already know and trust one another. Before a wedding can take place, several rules must be followed. The church oversees marriage, ensuring that the couple are not closely related and that no previous marriage prevents the union. Public announcements, known as bans, are often read aloud during church services for several consecutive weeks. This gives anyone who knows of a legal reason to prevent the marriage an opportunity to speak. Only after these formalities are completed can the ceremony proceed. Wedding celebrations themselves are joyful occasions. Friends, relatives, and neighbors gather for music, dancing, shared meals, and laughter. For many villages, a wedding becomes one of the largest social events of the year. Yet beneath the celebration lies an important understanding. Marriage is expected to create a stable household capable of raising children and contributing to the community. Once married, husbands and wives generally have clearly defined responsibilities. Although these roles vary across regions and social classes, men usually perform heavy agricultural labor, manage livestock, repair buildings, and represent the household in legal matters. Women oversee cooking, spinning wool, weaving cloth, raising children, tending gardens, caring for poultry, and preserving food for winter. These responsibilities are demanding, and successful households depend upon both partners working together throughout the year. Homes themselves are often surprisingly small. Most peasant families live in one-room cottages built from timber, wattle, and daub, with thick thatched roofs overhead. The central hearth provides warmth, light, and a place for cooking. Smoke escapes slowly through the roof rather than a proper chimney, leaving darkened beams overhead and the familiar smell of wood smoke clinging to clothing and furniture. Privacy, as we understand it today, barely exists. Parents, children, and sometimes even grandparents share the same living space. Animals frequently become part of household life as well. Chickens wander freely in and out of the yard. Cats help control mice that threaten valuable grain supplies. During particularly harsh winters, smaller livestock may even be brought indoors for warmth and protection. Their presence adds both comfort and noise to everyday life, reminding everyone how closely human survival depends upon healthy animals. Hospitality is another deeply respected tradition. Travelers, pilgrims, and distant relatives occasionally arrive seeking food or shelter. Although resources are limited, offering simple hospitality is often viewed as both a moral duty and a practical investment. After all, today's host may become tomorrow's traveler. Kindness shown to strangers strengthens the bonds that connect communities across medieval Europe. Evenings bring the family together once again around the glowing hearth. Without books, televisions, or electronic devices, entertainment comes through conversation, music, simple games, and storytelling. Elders recount tales of local heroes, miraculous saints, distant kings, or mysterious creatures said to inhabit nearby forests. Children listen carefully, not only for amusement, but also because these stories often contain lessons about courage, honesty, loyalty, and faith. As candles burn lower and the fire fades into glowing embers, another ordinary day quietly comes to an end. The family offers evening prayers, secures the cottage against the night's cold, and settles beneath heavy wool blankets. Tomorrow will bring another cycle of work, responsibility, and tradition, much like countless days before it. For medieval families, these customs provide stability in an uncertain world. Every member understands their role, every season brings familiar duties, and every generation passes its knowledge to the next. While modern life offers greater personal freedom, the close-knit households of the Middle Ages reveal a society built upon cooperation, shared responsibility, and enduring tradition. But even the strongest families cannot escape one final reality of medieval life: the constant presence of illness, plague, and death. In the final chapter of our journey, we will explore how people faced disease, loss, and uncertainty, and why hope remained one of their greatest sources of strength despite the many hardships surrounding them. As another quiet morning begins, a cool mist settles gently across the fields, softening the outlines of cottages and distant woodlands. The village awakens much as it always has. Farmers lead their animals toward the pastures, women fetch water from the well, and children chase one another along narrow dirt paths before beginning their daily chores. At first glance, everything seems peaceful. Yet beneath this familiar routine lies a quiet truth that every medieval person understands. Life is uncertain. Illness can arrive without warning, accidents happen in an instant, and death is far more familiar than it is for most people today. In the Middle Ages, there are no hospitals as we know them, no antibiotics to fight infection, and no understanding of bacteria or viruses. A small cut received while chopping wood may become dangerously infected. A simple fever that would be easily treated today can last for days or weeks, leaving families to hope and pray for recovery. Every household has witnessed sickness, and nearly everyone has experienced the loss of someone they love. Most medical knowledge comes from a mixture of ancient writings, local traditions, herbal remedies, and religious belief. Village healers, experienced midwives, and occasionally trained physicians care for the sick using the best knowledge available to them. Herbs such as sage, mint, thyme, and chamomile are grown in gardens and prepared as teas, poultices, or ointments. Some treatments genuinely provide comfort, while others have little effect. Without modern science, however, it is often impossible to know which remedies truly work. People also believe that health depends upon maintaining balance within the body. Medieval physicians commonly follow the ancient theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness is thought to occur when these humors become unbalanced. To restore health, treatments may include carefully chosen diets, herbal medicines, or even bloodletting. Although these practices seem unusual today, they are based on centuries of respected medical tradition. The greatest challenge comes from infectious diseases. Smallpox, dysentery, influenza, tuberculosis, and many other illnesses spread through towns and villages with frightening speed. Crowded homes, poor sanitation, and close contact with animals create conditions where disease can easily pass from one person to another. Families often care for sick relatives inside the same small room where everyone sleeps, making isolation nearly impossible. Perhaps no event better represents the fears of medieval Europe than the arrival of the Black Death during the 14th century. Beginning in the late 1340s, this devastating plague spreads across the continent with astonishing speed. Entire villages lose large portions of their population within months. Busy towns fall strangely silent as homes stand empty and fields remain unworked. For many people living through those years, it feels as though the world itself is changing forever. Most medieval people have no way of understanding exactly how the plague spreads. Some believe it is a punishment from God. Others blame unusual weather, poisonous air, or the movements of the stars. Many desperately search for explanations that fit the knowledge available to them. Fear spreads almost as quickly as the disease itself, and rumors travel from village to village alongside frightened travelers. Yet even during these dark years, life does not completely stop. Farmers continue planting crops because future harvests are still needed. Bakers continue making bread. Priests continue offering prayers and comforting grieving families. Parents continue caring for children. The determination to carry on, despite overwhelming uncertainty, becomes one of the defining strengths of medieval society. Childbirth presents another great danger. While many mothers deliver healthy babies, complications are common and often impossible to treat. Midwives, respected for their experience, assist during births using practical knowledge passed down through generations. Every successful birth is celebrated not only as the arrival of a new family member, but also as a reminder of life's remarkable resilience. Life expectancy during the Middle Ages is often misunderstood. While average lifespans appear shorter than today, this is largely because many children do not survive infancy. Those who reach adulthood and avoid major diseases, accidents, or famine may live into their 50s, 60s, or even beyond. Old age is respected because it represents both wisdom and extraordinary survival in a difficult world. Funerals become familiar community gatherings rather than rare occasions. Church bells ring solemnly as neighbors gather to honor the deceased. Candles flicker softly inside stone churches while prayers echo beneath vaulted ceilings. Graves are often simple, marked by wooden crosses or modest stones. Death is not hidden from everyday life. Instead, it is accepted as a natural part of existence, encouraging people to value faith, family, and community while they can. Despite the hardships, moments of joy remain surprisingly common. Harvest festivals still fill village squares with music and dancing. Weddings continue bringing families together in celebration. Children laugh while playing simple games in open fields. Travelers share fascinating stories from distant kingdoms. Even during times of illness, people continue finding reasons to smile, sing, and hope for better days ahead. As the sun slowly sets beyond the fields, golden light bathes the cottages in a peaceful glow. Smoke rises gently from chimneys as families gather once more around warm fires. Supper is shared, prayers are spoken, and another day quietly comes to an end. No one knows what tomorrow may bring. It may bring rain, prosperity, sickness, or celebration. Such uncertainty is simply part of medieval life. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these people leave behind. They live in a world without modern medicine, without advanced technology, and without many comforts we now consider essential. Yet they continue building homes, raising children, cultivating fields, helping neighbors, and believing that each new sunrise is worth welcoming. In our final chapter, we will reflect on the remarkable legacy of the Middle Ages, exploring how these strange rules, daily routines, and enduring traditions shaped the foundations of the modern world, and why, despite the hardships, medieval life was far more complex and fascinating than we often imagine. As the evening sun slowly disappears beyond the rolling hills, the sounds of the medieval village begin to fade. The blacksmith's hammer falls silent. Merchants have packed away their goods. Farmers have returned from the fields, and the final church bell echoes softly through the cool evening air. Thin streams of smoke drift from thatched rooftops as families gather around warm hearths for one last meal before sleep. Candles flicker gently behind tiny windows, casting golden light into the darkness. After our long journey through the Middle Ages, this peaceful village feels strangely familiar. Over the past hours, we have walked narrow streets, crossed muddy fields, visited crowded marketplaces, entered humble cottages, and stood quietly inside ancient stone churches. Along the way, we discovered a world governed by countless rules that shape nearly every moment of daily life. We learned that where you were born often determined the course of your entire future. A peasant remained a peasant, a noble remained a noble, and the social order rarely changed. We saw how villages worked together according to traditions that had been followed for generations, sharing fields, grazing land, and responsibilities that helped entire communities survive. We explored the surprising laws that controlled clothing, where even the color of your cloak or the fabric of your sleeves could reveal your place in society. We sat beside glowing fires while families shared simple meals of bread and pottage, discovering how religion, seasons, and harvests shaped every bite of food. We entered medieval churches where bells marked the passing hours, where faith guided everyday decisions, and where hope offered comfort during uncertain times. We witnessed courts that settled disputes with public punishments, designed not only to enforce the law, but also to remind entire communities of the importance of honesty and trust. Our journey carried us into lively towns filled with craftsmen, apprentices, merchants, and travelers from distant lands. There, we discovered carefully regulated markets where fair weights, honest trade, and skilled workmanship formed the foundation of urban life. Inside medieval homes, we watched families work together from sunrise until sunset. Children learned practical skills by observing their parents. Grandparents shared stories beside warm fires. Marriage, family, and community created stability in a world where comfort was often limited, but human connection remained strong. Finally, we reflected on the ever-present reality of sickness, hardship, and uncertainty. Without modern medicine or scientific knowledge, medieval people faced challenges that would seem overwhelming today. Yet they continued planting crops, raising children, celebrating weddings, helping neighbors, and looking toward tomorrow with remarkable resilience. It is easy to imagine medieval life as nothing but darkness and difficulty. Certainly, there were hardships we would never wish to experience ourselves. Life was physically demanding, opportunities were limited, and survival depended heavily on the weather, good harvests, and good fortune. But there was another side to this world. Life moved at a slower pace. People knew the changing seasons intimately. Families spent long evenings together without distraction. Communities depended upon one another in ways that are difficult to imagine in today's busy world. Skills were learned patiently over many years, and even ordinary tasks carried a sense of purpose that connected people to the land and to each other. The Middle Ages were not simply an age of castles and kings, nor only an age of plague and hardship. They were an age filled with ordinary people living ordinary lives, people who laughed, worried, celebrated, loved, and hoped just as we do today. Many of the traditions born during those centuries still echo through our modern world. Some of our oldest universities were founded during the Middle Ages. Many town centers still follow medieval street plans. Ancient churches continue to stand after hundreds of years. Even familiar words, customs, festivals, and legal traditions trace their origins back to this remarkable period of history. As our journey comes to its gentle conclusion, the village grows quieter still. One by one, candles are extinguished behind wooden shutters. The stars begin to appear above the rooftops, shining over fields that have witnessed countless generations come and go. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls softly from the forest, while the final embers of household fires glow faintly in the darkness. Tomorrow, the villagers will rise once again with the sound of the church bell. They will tend their animals, repair fences, bake bread, gather water, care for their families, and continue the quiet routines that have shaped their lives for centuries. And now, as our own journey through medieval Europe comes to an end, perhaps you too can picture those peaceful villages resting beneath the night sky, far removed from the noise of the modern world, yet still connected to us through the shared story of human history. Thank you for joining this relaxing journey through the strange rules of the Middle Ages. I hope these stories have offered a peaceful escape into the past, and perhaps a new appreciation for the ordinary people whose lives quietly shaped the world we know today. If you enjoyed spending this quiet evening exploring history together, consider leaving a like and sharing your favorite moment from our journey in the comments below. Your support helps this channel continue creating long-form history documentaries for relaxation, learning, and peaceful sleep. And if you'd like to drift through more forgotten civilizations, ancient kingdoms, medieval villages, Roman roads, Viking settlements, or other fascinating chapters of history, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next bedtime history adventure. Until next time, thank you for listening. Sleep well, and may your dreams carry you gently through the quiet landscapes of history.